Think of one of your worst habits. Really, go ahead. Think about it for a moment. Because we all engage in some kind of behavior that we wish we could change, but we don't. Maybe it's binge watching our favorite shows on Netflix. Maybe it's doom scrolling on our phones at 11 p.m. at night when we know, oh, I see some nods, thank you, when we know we should be going to sleep. Of course, there's other habits. Some people smoke or eat unhealthy foods. Others procrastinate. And some say to themselves, every single day at 5 p.m., I know I should leave the office, but I just can't. I hear lots of lots of nods and people who are resonating with those examples. Well, Stephen Covey once said, our character is basically a composite of our habits. Because they are consistent, often unconscious patterns, they constantly, daily express our character. So if we really know that our current habits do not define the person we want to present to the world, the question that I want us to think about this morning is, how do we break the cycle? Because many of us say, oh, I wish I did less of that, or maybe more so, we say about others, our loved ones, our partners, our family members, I wish they did less of X, Y, or Z. But truly, what is the motivating factor that ultimately allows someone else to change their behavior? Because it's a long-time assumption that we can't convince someone else to change. Even if we say it over and over and over again, that's not the way. Because psychologists all seem to agree that the number one way of changing a habit is not by only doing less of a certain behavior, but rather the number one way of changing a habit is by introducing something new. A new, different, positive habit that disrupts the negative habit, the one you're trying to change. Clinician Dr. Michelle Maidenberg explains that it's very difficult for the brain to distinguish between negative and positive behaviors because our brains just like to repeat actions. But if we choose to introduce small, achievable, positive habits, it's likelier that we will experience enduring positive change. In other words, habits replace habits. But she also mentions when the habit is antithetical to our value system, when our behavior doesn't match who we want to be, sometimes our brain tells us, you know what, these bad habits are less desirable and newer habits are easier to adopt because we want to present ourselves to the world in a different way. Now, when I read this explanation by the clinician, by Dr. Maidenberg, that it's possible to change our behavior in the realization that our habits, our behaviors may not be aligned with who we want to be, I couldn't help but think to myself, this is revelation. Because what happens when the Jews in Egypt, when the slaves finally leave? I want you to think about these slaves and their habits. Think about their patterns. They are enslaved for 400 years in Egypt to another people. Now that kind of mindset is impossible to disrupt overnight. They're shackled. They're told what to do. They're told where to go, what to eat, where to be, what to think. A slave's habits define them, and therefore, if repeated enough, the mind says, this is who you are. You're a slave and nothing more. But then we know that the Jews travel through the wilderness, and they're released from their physical shackles, but I'm not sure that they're yet released from their mindset. In fact, I don't believe that the Jews begin to change who they are and who they present themselves to the world until the very moment that the Torah is given at Mount Sinai. Because suddenly God says to the Jewish people, You can be something different. Eliyahu Kitov, author of the Book of Heritage, which is a series of essays and commentaries, both on the Parshiot and the Jewish holidays, he gives God a voice. And listen to the voice that God uses. God pleads with the children of Israel, you, all of you, listen. Unlike Egyptian tyrants, you shall be unto me a kingdom of Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, not a people of overlords, which fattens upon the toils of slaves, nor a lowly people enslaved by a harsh master nation, but you shall be a people whose sons are sovereign. In other words, God gives the slaves the ability to see themselves through a different lens, to exist in a world in which they're no longer enslaved by another, in servitude by a tyrant. The Jews transform into human beings that are called by the Holy One to recognize their value, to act in partnership with God. It's the very moment I believe that the Jewish people are given their purpose to no longer be slaves, to no longer think like slaves, but now to be a light unto the nations. And this is why I believe we call the giving of the Torah revelation. Because remember what Martin Buber says about revelation. Creation is the origin. Redemption is the goal. But revelation is not a fixed, dated point poised between the two. The revelation at Sinai is not this midpoint itself, but the perceiving of it. And such perception is possible at any time. Meaning every single day of our lives, every single day, there are moments in which God is nudging our souls, asking us to move forward, to discard the habits that don't serve us, but also to form the habits that serve the world so that we feel as if we are blessings in a world in which we are so very blessed. A revelation and a shedding of the habits that take over and muddy our souls, and a revelation and accepting of the habits that lead us to holier heights. Now, it makes me a little sad because Shavuot happens to be one of the holidays that really doesn't get the attention it deserves. When people ask about Shavuot, they know that we serve cheesecake, there's dairy involved. Jews don't always do well with dairy. So Shavuot, maybe because we don't have many rules, there's no Seder, there's no Sukkah, there's just not a lot of attention. And I find this to be such a shame because Shavuot is a gift. It's a holiday we're celebrating in just a few days. It's Zman Matan Toratenu, the time in which we commemorate the receiving of our holy Torah. It's the time in which we say, here is an opening for an honest dialogue with God and ourselves. And it's the time in which we remind ourselves we too can release the shackles of the habits that we wish to change. And in saying that, we tell ourselves it's never too late to transform our souls. There's a story in which Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, Orthodox rabbi and thinker, during the Yom Kippur War, he decides to go visit the border between Israel and Egypt. He wants to give the soldiers some support and encouragement, and he learns a surprising lesson. What he learns is that the Air Force pilots explain that the best way to avoid enemy fire is actually to fly the plane lower than one would expect. They said at that point the plane is almost undetectable. So the rabbi came away learning this interesting fact, but he also realized he learned something about human behavior, that when we fly low, and for him, he takes that as an interpretation of when we choose to take small, achievable steps. That's when we ultimately avoid the Yetzer Hara, one's evil inclination. In this case, the Yetzer Hara being that annoying voice that tells you, you know what, you're never going to change. You know that little thing you say over and over again, I'm not going to do that anymore? It's the Yetzer Hara who says to you, nope, you'll still be the very same person. But the rabbi learned, no, that voice is eliminated, that voice is diminished when we choose to take small, positive, impactful steps forward. Because revelation is it's not when bad habits turn into good habits. Revelation is the realization that one has the capacity to do better, that one has the capacity to live in this world with confidence and humility, being a better person. And the Torah is the framework in which we achieve those goals. The final lines of our parsha this morning reads, "These are the commandments that the Lord gave Moses for the Israelite people on Mount Sinai." And so we know revelation begins on Har Sinai. It lifted a heavy veil upon the eyes of an enslaved people. It was in that very moment that the Jewish people discovered their worth and discovered who they are meant to be in this world. But if we let it, and I hope and pray we do, this journey continues with each and every one of us. An ongoing willingness to release the habits that diminish our potential, and openness, a revelation of the light that each one of us is meant to bring to this world. May Torah transform each of our souls. Shabbat Shalom.